So brand new bikes are pretty expensive these days, so buying a second-hand bike might seem like a fairly good option, and we have a typical second-hand bike here. This one cost me £400. But what do you need to look out for when buying a second-hand bike? What are the pitfalls? What are the downsides? Well, I'm joined by Jim, an expert bike mechanic, and he's going to give us a run through of what to look for. So what are the main things to look out for?
So really, it's got to come down to safety first, hasn't it? So inevitably, if you're going to buy a second-hand bike, yeah, there are bargains out there. Get somebody like myself, just to give you a bit of peace of mind is the best thing, because bikes don't come with a service history, unfortunately, which is an issue, isn't it?
Yeah,
so I suspect you've got yourself a bargain here, and we'll find out shortly. But certainly, I think you're wise to bring it to me today.
All right, let's dive in.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at this front wheel, and the first basic check is the quick release done up tight, and is the wheel actually even in its dropouts? And more importantly, what I always look for is the little springs in there. Are they facing tapered end inboard and the wide end outboard? Because quite often I find that they've accidentally got reversed when somebody took the wheel off. But this one seems okay, the quick release is working all right, the wheel sits into the dropouts quite nicely. So let's do that up again, not too tight, because the chances are at some point in the process I'm going to take it off anyway. And while we're playing around with that front hub, I'm going to see if there's any play in it. So what I'm doing is literally waggling the wheel around to see if the axle inside the hub has got play in it, which would tell me that the bearings are on their way out. So they're heavily worn. So we give it a quick spin. I mean, it sounds nice and quiet. And while I'm doing that, I can see if it's true using the brake pads as a reference. And it is true. It's a decent wheel, actually. So we're looking just there. Look, that gap's staying constant. So that tells me the wheel is true. And I'm using my ears, and I'm having a good listen to that hub. If it sounded rumbly or rough, that would tell me the wheels are on their, the bearings rather, are on their way out. But you know what? Seems all right. Stop it with my hand, give it another push side to side like that, and see if there's anything beyond what we might call kind of normal flex, because rim brake wheels do flex a bit anyway, so don't be too alarmed if it is a little bit bendy. Disc brake wheels tend to be a little bit stiffer. So the other thing I'm going to do, working from the middle outwards, is I'm going to see about the tensions and condition of the spokes, and also are they all there? Sometimes it's easy to miss the fact that a wheel is missing a spoke. So while I don't put a spoke tension meter on them at this point in time, what I do tend to do is I pinch them in pairs like this and just ask myself, do they all feel kind of okay? Which they do. I think it's only like a 20 spoke front wheel, this, something like that. One thing I'm noticing, which is an overall thing with this bike, but certainly you can see it here, is we've got some water damage. So these spokes are a little bit corroded. You can see the same on the aluminium braking surface just here, look. We've definitely got a little bit of oxidisation there where the aluminium's got damp. And I would also say that the spoke nipples themselves here are looking a little bit corroded. Now, that means that they are probably not brass nipples. So while that's not an issue at the minute, it might be if we ever had to get a spoke replacement done on this wheel, because if I was to try and wind a corroded spoke nipple out from the inside of the rim, it might just snap. But you know, all I'm going to do is I'm going to give the customer, or David in this case, an advisory on that. That would go on the worksheet, and I'd just say, look, you've got water damage to this bike, be aware.
This bike service is going very well, and it will soon be ready for my first ride. But are you ready for a world of cycling possibilities? With NordVPN, you can protect yourself anytime you use the internet when you're out on your bike. And what is it protecting you from? When you stop at a cafe during your ride and log onto a public Wi-Fi, with NordVPN, you stay protected against hackers, viruses, and other nasties out to get you. Take cookies, for example. They aren't as simple as they seem. Sometimes it's not only about keeping your data to personalize your browsing experience. Did you know that some companies may increase prices for returning customers, hoping you buy their product out of fear that the prices will go up again? You don't want that to happen, do you? Also, with NordVPN, you can stream live bike races from anywhere in the world, even if they're not available in your country. So join millions of cyclists who trust NordVPN to safeguard their cycling adventures. You get yourself signed up right now, use my special link, and you get 4 months extra on a 2-year plan. And they've got a 30-day money-back guarantee as well. So go try it out, use my special link down below in the description.
Now, the next thing I'm going to do while we're still at this end of the bike is I'm going to have a good look at this tyre. Normal thing with tyres is give it a spin. Is it facing in the right direction? Because nearly every tyre that I ever get to see is facing backwards. So whenever you look at a tyre, there'll be an arrow somewhere written on it, and it will tell you something like forwards and backwards, or front and rear, or rotation. As you can see here, check for that, because I guarantee the tyre's on backwards. So a couple of other things with this tyre. I'm going to get straight to the point. It's knackered, it's had it. The reason I'm saying that is it's separating quite clearly. So you can see here, this tyre has been left with no air in it for a very long time, probably in a overly damp or overly hot environment. So this tyre is a write-off and is not safe for the road.
Straight in the bin. Straight
in the bin, in fact, yeah. But that would go on the list of advisories. Next thing I'm going to look at is this rather beautiful Ultegra rim brake that we've got here. Now the first thing to note is it's filthy. So if I was doing a bling up job on this bike, I'd take it off, disconnect the cable, I'd probably put it through a parts washer, because you can see it's got all kinds of gunge down in the pivots. So while effectively, you know, seems to be doing its job, definitely wants a bit of a wash, because you've got all kinds of plastic bushes in the back of here, which if they're left contaminated with this gunge, eventually it's going to affect the operation of the caliper. And we can see while we're talking about that this braking surface on this wheel here is pretty good. So we can see that all the way around it's not dished. So what I mean by that is, if this wheel was overly worn, perhaps by being ridden an awful lot in the wet, say, eventually the surface of the rim, instead of being completely flat, gets dished. Now most wheel rims will have some sort of wear indicator. So that might be a line that's cut in, and that line will disappear when there's not enough aluminium left. It might be a hole that's drilled through from the back, and the hole appears when there's not enough material left. It's confusing, but effectively, I would say if you're going to be assessing whether a rim brake wheel is any good, you need to see that the wear indicators are not showing a lot of wear with one or the other of those scenarios I just talked about, if that makes sense. So I'm going to do the bars and the stem and the levers next, and I'm just going to have a bit of a feel of how they all are. So one thing I have noticed about this bike is I think it's got an aftermarket set of bars and a stem on it. These are much older. So a little bit of detective work there would make me think, right, if the customer has fitted this himself, and I can tell you it has, because we've also got aftermarket lizard skin bar tape, which is knackered. That's another 20 quid on your bill there, David.
I've been polite.
Yeah, this bar tape's properly had it. So yeah, so I'm thinking, if this has got aftermarket bars and stem, has it been done up correctly? So what I'm going to put on my worksheet, my report at this point, is do a bolt check around the front end, around the cockpit of the bike, because there's every chance that 2 of these, so you've got 4 stem bolts, yeah. So there's every chance that 2 of these stem bolts here are probably not tight enough, and there's every chance that 2 of them are too tight, which is a common mistake people make with stem faceplates. You normally want to be doing them up in a cross pattern, where you do something like 1, 3, 2, 4, and you normally want to maintain an equal gap. If these are the top 2 bolts and these are the bottom 2, as you bring that faceplate up, unless it explicitly tells you otherwise, you normally want equal tensions and equal fresh air. Some of them work on a scenario where they want you to close the bottom up to completely and then bring, but generally speaking, so I'd be thinking about that, and I'd make a note of that, have a bit of a look at this. So we've kind of done the front end of the bike. We're about 30% of the way through. So the next thing I'm going to look at, while I've got this lovely big triangle in front of me here, is has it got any dents in it? So I'm going to have a good look around it, and I'm going to ask myself, is it carrying any knocks and dents? And while I'm at it, I'm going to play that lovely triple buttered aluminium Such a good frame. It's a sexy frame, isn't it? I'm just going to play that lovely tune on it and have a bit of a look around for damage. So we have got a couple of scratches on it, but I'm not so worried about scratches. I'm more worried about actual physical dents and deformities. And I'm also, the big one that I'm looking for, and this is really important, for a carbon bike or for an alloy bike or any bike, where you've got the points where tubes are joined, here and down here, look for evidence of cracking in the paint. Now, on this bike, we've got a lot of cracked paint, but it's where this stuff here has been applied for cosmetic effect. And I think that's a different thing. I think this black stuff here has gone crazed because it's just been heated up and cooled down over a series of seasons. That's cosmetic. What I want to know is, are any of the welds splitting? Where you can see the welds here. So I'll definitely go looking for cracks, especially around a notorious place is at the top of the head tube here. If you see tiny little hairline cracks doing that, going down, it's because it's starting to actually fail. Now I can't see anything. Let's get onto the drivetrain. It's got some fairly racy gears on it. We can see from here it's got one of the Cannondale hologram spider ring type crankset things, which they make themselves. They're quite sexy, they're very light. This has got a 52-36 on it, so quite big ratios, definitely racy stuff. What I want to know before I get any further is the bottom bracket okay? So I'm just going to give it a bit of a turn, and I'm just going to sort of have a bit of a feel. I'm actually going to turn it with my finger like this, because what I don't want to do is hold the pedal, because the pedal might have a rough bearing in it, okay? And that might make me think, yeah, the bottom bracket's had it. So I'm actually just going to do it like this for now, and just see if any kind of grumbly noises come back at me. I mean, it seems all right so far, okay? So I'm going to check for play. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to get hold of the left and the right crank arm. Again, try and keep your hands off the pedals when you do this, because the pedals might give you a false reading. And I'm just going to wrench it. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm basically being a bit rough with it, because what I'm trying to pick up on is that crankset waggling around inside that frame at all. The bearings don't feel rough on rotation, okay? You've just seen me pedal the bike with my fingers, and actually it's spinning quite nicely. So I'd be making a note on my sheet right now, and I'd probably be inclined, for the 10-15 minutes it's going to take me, I'd probably be inclined to pop this whole crankset out, clean the wave washers up, and then just put it back up to manufacturer's torque and just check that it's right. And the other benefit for me doing that would be, while the crankset's out, I can actually get hold of the bearings themselves, and I can turn them, and then I can get the report straight from the horse's mouth, if that makes sense, rather than relying on the crankset to tell me. Let's move on to looking at the chain rings themselves. So what I'm asking myself in this case is, are any of these teeth missing? And don't be fooled, because there will be a few that have got different shapes to the others. Some of them are tall, some of them are short, and that's for shifting performance. There's one there, look. That one's noticeably flatter than the others, but they do that for a reason. And more importantly, does the wear between the teeth look disproportionate? So the way to tell whether it's okay is, that valley in there now is a nice C shape. We can see, look, it doesn't look overly worn. There's obviously not a lot of metal missing from in there. If these valleys in there weren't a C shape, so I'm going to draw it with my hands, okay? So I'm looking for that kind of profile, because that's where your chain link is going to sit into. This is your chain link, it sits in there like that. That's all good. If it looks like that, can you see I'm squaring my hand out now, and what I've got is a really obvious cut valley. The chain link is going to sit in and rattle around in there. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And that's evidence of a worn out chain ring. And you generally tend to find, where you've got a double crankset at the front, the inner ring is almost never worn out, because nobody ever really spends that much time in the inner ring, and when they do, they bounce straight back out of it again. Let's have a look at the front derailleur next. So the cable, as it comes up to the front derailleur here, is pretty clean. It's quite bright. These cables, generally speaking, have a shiny surface which helps it slip smoothly through the cable inners and cable outers rather. It moves, that's the first thing, and it trims back down again. So let's do it again. So it feels awful through the lever. That's the first thing I'm going to say, which tells me that probably the shifter guts have gone sticky or the cable's gone sticky inside the frame. But when I apply the trim, it trims, and when I apply the shift, it shifts. So there's not much wrong with the derailleur itself. It just feels very, very, very unhealthy at the lever. And another way of testing this is I can manually activate that derailleur and isolate the cable from the derailleur. So let's do that again. So look, I'm just doing that. The derailleur itself is absolutely fine. It's where it should be. There's no play in the pivots. When I do that with my hand, it goes backwards and forwards, does everything it needs to do. It's in line with the chain rings. It's got no play, no twist in it. Unsurprisingly, because it's never been out. It's never been out in the real world. So there's nothing wrong with the derailleur, but it feels rough. It's got to be the cable or the shifter, hasn't it? Probably recable that front derailleur. It's internally cable routed. Ching ching, see the money mounting up? It's not that bad. But I would definitely look to get that feeling a bit healthier, and I would do that by cleaning those shifter internals and probably applying a new cable and then going through the adjustment process again, because I think the derailleur itself is fine.
Now it gets juicy.
Yeah, well...
Have you seen that chain?
It is proper crusty, isn't it?
I haven't seen one like that in a long time.
However, I can tell you if it's okay. Let me get my gadget. So this is a chain wear checker. So what I'm looking for is, you can see the numbers here. And I'm going to put this on your chain and I'm going to tell you how worn is it. If it gets that far, which it ain't gonna, trust me, if it gets that far, your chain's dead. Let's actually put it on, because I'm not overly concerned about the fact that it's a bit rusty. We can get around that. I want to know the state of that. It's
filthy.
Outrageous. I don't know how you can sleep at night, honestly. So we're going to drop it in there like that. We're going to check it's engaged. Ready? Moment of truth. Let's pull that trigger. So, yeah. So don't put too much pressure. If you've got one of these exact ones, don't go like really wrenching it in. The minute it contacts, stop. So I'm telling you straight away, you've got what I just predicted. You got about 30–40% wear on it, maybe a tiny bit more. So your chain's all right. Just need to clean.
Okay.
So that's 40 quid.
So that's quite a good way to check if you are buying a second-hand bike, to have one of those devices.
Yeah, take one with you.
Yeah.
Chain wear is quite a good indicator around some of the other things that I'm talking about as well. Hopefully, I mean, in reality, a lot of the learning points in this video, you could take them all with you. You could take the video and go and do this. Yeah. You could really kick the tyres, you know what I mean, metaphorically speaking. But yeah, that would be a good thing. You're right. Take that with you. Take a chain checker, because it's a good indicator. That and the chain ring wear as well, you know, is a good indicator of kind of where you're at. Because visually it looks terrible, isn't it? But
yeah,
you're saying and actually visuals are quite often not the truth, though, are they? I see the point you're making. Effectively, it looks awful, doesn't it? But in reality, it's not. It's not worn out. It's just very caked up. I mean, it's easier to put a new chain on if you're feeling spendy, but it's also pointless in this case, because if you find out what model chain it actually is, it's probably going to be either a KMC or a Shimano or something like that.
It's just too dirty.
Yeah, it's filthy, isn't it? So it's a Shimano HG. It's the one it came with. Hands down, every day of the week, that's a Shimano OEM chain. So would you try cleaning it first to see how well it comes up? Yeah. Yeah, because, so what's the cost nowadays of 11-speed Ultegra chain? I don't know, $39.99 UK money. Don't know what country you're in, but broadly speaking, I'm going to say 40 quid in the UK, probably 45 euros, probably that's $50, is it? I'm not very good at exchange, but it's about that, isn't it? So for me to take that chain off, pop it off, stick it in a bath, and then put it back on and put some dry lube or whatever on it is still going to save you a bit of money. And also there's an environmental thing there. Why do I really want to go putting a perfectly good chain in the ground? I don't. So, you know, yes, it can be saved is the short answer. So the next thing I'm really going to start looking at is the rear derailleur, okay? Now, I can do a lot of different things here. there's a lot going on with the rear derailleur. So I'm going to work my way from the bottom up, and I'm going to ask myself, have these jockey wheels got sharp Ninja Star type teeth on them? And are the wheels actually turning all right? Same applies to the top one. So we can see down here that this is got to be the hairiest rear derailleur I've ever seen in my life.
It looks horrendous.
It is. I think it's spider's webs. I think it's just been hoovering up dust its entire life, this bike, wherever it's been parked. But again, there's nothing really wrong with the top jockey wheel. And actually, it needs to not have much play in it, because if you've got a guide pulley that's got a ton of play in it, you're going to find your gear shifting is really vague. You need stiffness in the bearing that's inside there for this to actually sort of get that real rifle bolt shift action going. The bottom one's called the tension pulley and is less important. I'm also going to ask myself, and this is a biggie, with older derailleurs, with a lot of use, you tend to get quite a lot of waggle or play, if you like, in that there. So this is the main pivot where it fixes into the hanger. So what I'm going to do is I'm physically going to get hold of the body of the derailleur, and I'm going to ask myself, is there play in that bearing there? Because that's a real game changer, because it's not usually a service item. Handily, there's zero play in that. So actually, when I do this, that derailleur is pretty damn good. And another good way of checking this, if we take a little step back, is I'm going to manually make this derailleur shift. So I'm going to turn the crankset like this, and I'm just going to make the derailleur do its job. Literally. And I'm just going to ask myself, again, using my sensors, is it doing its job? Let's let the shifter out, so that we've actually stick it all the way in top, like that, so we've got the full range of movement. Yeah, it feels great. Feels really good. There's not much wrong with that at all. So it's doing its job. Do I think everything looks straight, north and south? Because I want to know, is the derailleur hanger bent? And it can quite often be hard to identify whether it is or not, unless it really... So this is the derailleur hanger just here. This piece of metal, and if SRAM get their way, these will be a thing of the past soon, I think, which is probably no bad thing. So this little tab of metal, this lug that this is mounted to, it's as common as anything for that to actually have gone slightly claw-footed is the best way of describing it. So your derailleur hanger sits like that relative to the bike, and it doesn't take much for it to have been usually pushed inboard. And a good indicator that you've got a bent derailleur hanger is marks to the outside of the actual mech itself.
Yeah, I noticed there's
there's a little bit.
It's not crash damage.
But it's not crash damage, yeah, exactly that. If this was really... So you tend to see a scrape mark there, one there like that, and this knuckle here has got a good old scrape as well. If I see that, I'm thinking, yeah, bent derailleur hanger every day of the week. That's got to be a thing. But as it is, looking at it, and given the other manual check I just did on this rear derailleur, I'm going to say it's probably straight. We are going to check the condition of the cassette. So an educated bit of guesswork right now would be, if this is okay, and this has been okay, and that crankset was okay, I'm going to tell you that this cassette is probably going to be okay as well. But there is a way of knowing. You'll tend to find these teeth here have a little barbed hook on them. And what that is where the chain has slowly but surely got bits of metal, filed it away and left a little deposit on the head of one of the teeth. And you can feel it, because you'll feel it with the tip of your nail. You'll literally do that and there'll be a little hooked section. You'll quite often find it in first, second and third. You might not find it further down the block. Sorry, up the block. So yeah, so I don't think this cassette's worn at all, because as I run my fingers across the heads of the teeth, I can't feel any of that nasty sort of sharp hookiness, if you like. It's quite hard to demonstrate, but you'll know it when you see it. Okay, let's go. So we are currently in 11th, and we're going to check the downshifting. So we've got no shift. Let's do that again. So no shift whatsoever. We can see that the derailleur is moving, okay? But we can also see that I'm not getting anything. Oh, you see that, David?
It's a bit shy, that's all.
Just tried it, didn't it? Yeah, just wait to show its head. So it could be a sticky cable, But my feeling actually is, it just isn't set up. Just see if we can do a quick fix. Let's just bang a bit of cable tension into it, shall we? Oh, hello. Right, let's try that again. So, that lovely old Tegra, just so good. So we just got all 11 gears. Okay, so we're in first. All right. Now, the other way round is going to tell me whether the cable's any good, because this is now going to be the derailleur pulling the cable back through the frame from the shifter. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th.
That's amazing. After maybe 5+ years of not being used,
Yeah.
it still works.
Not much wrong with it.
Bit rusty, but
Yeah.
it works.
So, my takeaways from that are, the chain is good. I don't care that it's rusty because we can get around that. The cassette is good. I don't care that it's rusty because you can clean that a little bit. You can take it apart and individual sprockets can be kind of cleaned up a little bit, but I'm pretty confident that that rust will come off over time anyway. The derailleur is tight as a drum. It was just lacking a little bit of barrel adjuster just there because it wasn't making those shifts. And we would do a full actual setup on it again. But for now, as a temporary fix, we managed to get all 11 gears. Okay, so, you know, a good thing to do here is whenever you go and look at purchasing a second-hand bike, whatever the purchase cost is, it would be wise to factor in maybe another 40 or 50% of that to spend having it checked out. So factor that in because you need to have that process carried out because there isn't a service history.
Well, I've got some work to do, so yeah, thanks for giving it a once over.
That's no problem.
Now, hopefully you enjoyed this video and let me know what you do to the bike. I'm thinking some carbon wheels and some other upgrades for a future video, so leave a comment down below. Let me know what I should do to the bike going forward. I've got loads more planned for it, but thanks for your time, Jim.
Yeah, cheers. No worries at all.
See you again next time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks a lot. Bye.